how do people actually learn, and how do people learn from the podcasts that we put together? And I'm thinking particularly about those ones we've done where we talk about them capturing wisdom, where we interview experts and we get down their great thoughts and capture them for people to tap into. I was reflecting on it because I was talking to one of the people who commissioned us for the last set of podcasts we did like that. And I realized that I had been sort of imagining that people would listen to these and they would absorb a huge amount of information and their skill levels would be upgraded because they've absorbed all this great stuff. And it made me realize when I was chatting to her about how you learn, that she said that she'd been in a meeting several months after the podcasts had been put out, and she suddenly remembered a very simple tip from the podcasts. And it's one that if you'd said to her, can you tell me anything you learned, she doubts whether or not she would have called that up because it was so simple. And it was one where one of the guys had said, when you're in these meetings, because they were about dealing with government authorities and being in meetings with government authorities, regulatory authorities. And the guy on the podcast had said, when you're taking notes in those meetings, that he had made the mistake in the early days of making notes about his own thoughts and about what he thought about what somebody had said, and reminders to himself about things that he should do following the meeting. And he quickly learned that actually that was not that useful. What was really useful was when key things were said or certain positions were taken by the regulators to write down what the person said word for word, verbatim. Because afterwards there could often be differences of opinion as to what was actually said. And by being able to pull his notes out and say, oh, well, actually what she said in word for word was this, or what he said was here, this specific thing. And this woman said she did that and was so glad she did, because afterwards that exact situation arose. There was disagreement and different views as to what had actually been said. And because she was able to read it out, it clarified it. And hearing that made me realize that, well, the way people learn, and I sort of knew this already, which surprises me that I'd forgotten. But the way people learn, certainly the way I learn, and lots of people I've worked with learn best, is when they come to something with a specific question and with a need.
Yeah.
And if you have that question and you find the answer and you use it, it sticks. Rather than this approach, which I've done in the past, and I'm sure you have too, where you go to a source of learning, and maybe there are lots of elements of that source of learning, and you try and absorb all of them. So I'll take a self-help book, say, and I'll read it, and I like putting little sticky notes that sort of poke out the side to point me to key points, and I may end up with 60 of these in a book or something like that. And yet, when I reflect back, maybe a week or two after I finish reading the book and making my notes, I don't recall 60. I'm not even sure if I recall any of them.
Your wisdom does not advance 60 sticky notes at a time.
It does not. No,
it doesn't work that way.
I'm probably lucky if it advances one or two. I might remember. I'm more likely to remember really good stories, and then might possibly remember the learning from that story. But if I'm going to remember any particular note from the book, it will be because I used it.
Yeah, exactly. And you use things one sticky note at a time.
Yeah.
And that's how it works. So that's kind of the magic and the challenge with podcasting is that it's not like an inoculation. You can't just listen to the podcast and now you have all the wisdom. Mm-hmm. I mean, wisdom is not shared in that way. Mm-hmm. And particularly with the podcasts that we do, it's not a simple way of just explaining, okay, I'm just going to give you instructions on how to do this. I'm essentially going to read a PowerPoint presentation. That's not at all what we're about. We're about sharing wisdom through stories that leaders are telling. And that just by its nature is a less efficient way of passing wisdom on. But it seems to be a very valuable way in just the way that you described it, is that people tell these stories. They lay out the impact that they had. They lay out the circumstances of their experiences and how they've solved these problems. And it's like you said in this example, some of the things tend to stick and people remember, oh, now I'm in this situation. I need to do this little thing. And it can even be something as simple as how to take notes in a specific way, which is never going to make anyone's top 10 list of sort of top tips on how to be a great leader.
No.
But here is a fantastic example of how that little bit, that little technical twist on how to take notes in a meeting. Someone said, I heard the podcast, I remembered it, I tried it out, and it worked. And now I understand why this is a great tip. So this person is now saying, oh, let me give you this wisdom bomb. This is so great. Like, this is how you need to take notes. And anyone who has not lived through that story will say, yeah, I know how to take notes. Thanks for the brilliancy. But guess what? It's value. And she knows that. And one day someone's going to come to her and say, oh, that tip you had about giving notes, that was the best tip ever. I did this and now things were great. And we had a disagreement after the meeting, but we knew exactly what was said. So all good. And unfortunately, that's the way it works. It works kind of one story at a time, to one person at a time. And you don't know the story that's going to work. And you don't know the person whom the story will work with. So it's inefficient.
Yeah.
But wisdom is shared, and it really helps out.